Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much to the organizers of the conference for the nice invitation and for giving me the opportunity to share my research with you. As you can see on the slides, the title of the presentation today is Do We Know That We Smile in the Same Language? And hopefully I'll be able to present a brief story of the language and intercultural communication studies. So why is this important? Why is this topic important for us? We say that the language faculties differentiate Homo sapiens from the other species. And the language is the characteristics that makes us human. And whenever we learn a language, actually we have a key into the realm of different thinking and into the realm of different feeling. And Sapir-Whorf are telling us that our world is as broad as the opportunities of our language. Let me just give you one example. While I was teaching Turkish to foreigners, one of the topics that I had to teach them was the difference between the so-called dili geçmiş zaman, that is the witness past tense, and the reported past tense, that is the mişli geçmiş zaman. At one stage, they were okay because I was only talking about the D, the witness one, and the mush, the one that has been reported to you. But after a while, I had to introduce the mush. And it was very difficult for them because we have expressions such as gelmişmiş, and that means I'm actually questioning the information presented to them. After a week or 10 days of discussions, they were kind of okay that we had this difference and we had the addition of the second mush. And later, I had to introduce gelmişmiş. And their reaction, especially the ones coming from English backgrounds, was, Sheila, now you're just showing off. This is simply not possible. But actually, as a native speaker of Turkish, and most probably as the native speakers of Turkish, you don't have any difficulties differentiating between the way of thinking whenever we are talking about the witness past versus the reported one, and whenever we are presenting our attitudes towards the information presented to us. So therefore, once again, each language is a key opening the door to a realm of thinking and also the realm of different feelings towards maybe exactly the same event in the piece of information. Each language gives us identity. And it gives us identity as individuals, but also as a community. And when we have multiple languages and we try to communicate with each other, it looks as if, and this is from Young's study, which was published in 2024, she is telling us that we are transported into different multifaceted worlds, that is, different cultures. And if we are switching between the different languages, according to her, we are moving into different worlds, into different cultures. So what about the intercultural communication? Is this something new, or did people actually talk among themselves? Did they experience or talk about their feelings in the past? And we see that actually the cross-cultural communication, the intercultural communicative competence isn't anything new, and the people have been talking about their experiences since the time when we had a little bit more writing which is more conventional than the clay tablets, the steles, the rune stones. And Poston and et al. Are telling us that we had this contact since maybe the very beginning of the creations of the different empires and the nation states. Just to give you a number of examples of how people are recording the culture. But first of all, I would like to mention the fact that Clyden Clickhorn and Raymond Williams, they are telling us that the culture is one of the most complicated words in the English language. Whenever Clyden started doing his research, he realized that there were more than 160 different definitions of culture culture. And some people just included, for instance, the architecture, the food that people are eating, or the way they are greeting. But other people were looking at the concept of culture from a broader perspective, and therefore different, as I said, 160 different definitions were introduced. And whenever I started doing research 60 years later in my 2012 and 2017 study, and I was focusing on the different definitions of culture, I discovered that unfortunately nothing had changed because we still had various and a big number of definitions. So therefore, I just want to present to you two examples how the different famous philosophers or people who had a chance to travel around the world presented culture to us and what they were focusing on. So the first example comes from Herodotus, and he is called the father of, or the first traveler writer. Herodotus actually was traveling in the northern shores of the Black Sea, and he was impressed by the people living there. But what he focused on was the following. He described the various tribes and how they live by agriculture, grazing, or hunting. How hard the winters are for the mules and the donkeys, but the horses were not affected that much. So you see, Herodotus' definition and his understanding, something that he really found interesting to talk about in his diaries, was the situation, the weather there, and how the different animals were affected. And then we have this example of Abu Rayhan al-Birun, and he is actually from Uzbekistan, but he's from Persian descent, and he focused on India, and there, for instance, he found the fact that they had different class systems, different rights and customs, and in particular, the positioning of the women in the society. So again, we see that different travelers were focusing on different things, and they were describing culture to us differently. So while I was given the invitation to present a paper at the third conference on the new trends in language studies, I thought about new trends, but also something that would be able to reach the gap between the past, the present, and the future, hopefully. So in this presentation, I'm mainly going to talk about intercultural communicative competence, but I'm going to focus on something that we usually do not kind of focus on a lot in our foreign language classes. So body language, first of all, then the facial expressions, and then I'm going to talk about the smiling and the emojis that we started using a lot. So let us continue with why body language. So we already talked about, and most probably we all agree, that language is culture specific. So we see exactly the same thing. We want to apologize, for instance, but we have different formulas to apologize. So this is our verbal way of expressing our ideas and feelings. But when we look at the communication, we see that only 35% of the communication is verbal, and the remaining 65% of the information that we want to transfer to our interlocutors is actually transferred using our body language. So, and the research again shows us that depending on the context and depending on the geographies where the people are living, the body language, even though exactly the same, for instance, movement or gesture or posture, can be interpreted differently in different cultures. So because we are foreign language teachers and because we are talking about the innovative methods related to the teaching on foreign languages, I thought that we should focus on the body language and a number of differences related to that. Then, of course, I really want to talk about the emojis as well. And why the emojis? Because this is just an introduction. I'm going to talk about the emojis in more detail in the following slides, but the research is showing us that 10 billion emojis are sent every day. And you will see that the emojis, even though we think they are universal, they can be interpreted differently in different cultures and even subcultures and subgroups within a particular society. So we also have, because they're here to stay, and it looks as if their number is getting bigger and bigger every year, so maybe, better later than never, we should start thinking about the emojis and how actually they can help or they can hinder the interaction between our students and their interlocutors. So first of all, body language. I took as an example the definition presented by FAST because it is the basic definition, and in a way it includes everything that is related to body language. So in FAST's definition, we see the gestures, the posture, the facial expressions, the eye contact, which is very important. If we are teaching, for instance, Chinese students, we know that we try to make eye contact with them, but usually they are afraid, or native speakers of Arabic, they are afraid of making eye contact with us. Then, for instance, how we touch each other, or what is the distance that we keep between each other, and of course, the silence and the sitting arrangements within the room, and of course the orientations, how we position ourselves in relationship to our interlocutors. In the Webster dictionaries, and this is the 3rd edition, they once again emphasize the importance of the facial expressions whenever we are discussing body language. So I took these as kind of a support for my kind of will or desire to talk about facial expressions, and especially smiling. And finally, we have this body language is not conveyed through words, but we have 4 different functions of the language, and through body language we actually can convey all those 4 different functions of the body language. Okay, so we say that once again, the body language is culture specific, and if we want to communicate properly, if we want to avoid biases and negative stereotypes, we have to talk to our students about the different rules in body language use. Just to give you 2 examples. So Wenji-san again talks about the difference between the so-called Western or English-speaking countries. And she shows us how the environment within which we find ourselves can determine how we use our body language and what is the appropriate distance of conversation. She's telling us that the countries that belong to the maritime civilizations, actually, they created a culture that promotes freedom and culture of dispersion. That is, people tend to sit far away from each other. And whenever we're having a conversation with them, or whenever we meet them for the first time, it is total taboo to touch those people, right? Differently from our culture, where we see each other, we usually hug, sometimes we kiss, but in the so-called English-speaking countries, this is in a way a taboo. And then she compares the Eastern or the English cultures with her own Chinese culture. And she is talking about a phenomena, let's see whether this is going to be familiar to you, the agricultural civilizations. In those civilizations, she says, people had to work together, and they depended on each other. Therefore, in the Chinese culture, whenever we see people, and actually if you are interested in this topic, I took this picture from Ellis and Ellis's article where they are talking about why girls hold hands in China and how this is really strange about the Westerners. Because in the Chinese culture, similarly to the Turkish culture, it is okay for the people to hold hands and, for instance, to go shopping or to talk about something else. And it is okay for the people who meet for the first time because, once again, as I said, they need each other just to meet, to say hi, to hug each other, and then to continue their work or collaboration together. Okay, so this is the difference between the body language. Why should we focus on the facial expressions? I wanted to focus on the facial expressions because we have a lot of research accumulated, and as early as actually 1960s, they started doing this research, but the age of the babies tested and their understanding and interpretations of the face expressions gets more detailed and the age gets smaller. So I have 2 study examples once again. And the first one is from Barrera and Maurer in 1981. Those two researchers tested babies who were only 3 months old. They had 12 girls and 12 boys, and they did not have any informalities. And whenever they asked, or whenever they showed them the pictures of the smiling and frowning expressions, the babies were able to differentiate those. And what was really a kind of finding that I really wanted to share with you, because it is related to my smiling conclusion here, is they looked more at the people who were smiling and the pictures where the people were smiling, right? And they enjoyed being in environments where the people were smiling more. So these were 3 months old babies. As I said, the age gets younger and younger. And we have a more recent study in 2007. Ferroni et al. Conducted a study with babies after they were born, 24 hours after they were born, okay? And after 48 hours and after 92 hours. And again, they included the pictures of the people who were smiling, frowning, or had neutral expressions. And they conducted 3 different tests. In the first test, nothing happened. But then, in the third one, they realized that the babies were looking more at the people who were smiling. They really wanted those people to be around them, and they were able to differentiate between the smiling, the neutral faces, and the frowning faces. Once again, they accepted it as the proof that the babies as young as 24 hours, right, are able to differentiate between the smiling, the frowning, and the neutral faces, but they definitely preferred the smiley faces. Okay, so now let us move to the emojis. As I already mentioned, the emojis are the inevitable part of our everyday interactions. And the reason for that is the face-to-face interactions and the so-called classic written interactions, their number is getting smaller and smaller. But the number of the so-called computer-mediated interactions, that is the WhatsApp messages, the X messages, the Instagram messages, you name it, we have it, right, is getting bigger and bigger. And the Schwartz et al., in their study, Generation WhatsApp, they are talking about the fact that nowadays just messaging is a normal part of the interaction, and the adolescents do not know any other way of interaction. They did a study in 2010 and then a study in 2015, and they realized that whenever they asked teenagers what is happening, do you have face-to-face interactions with your peers, in 2010 they said 33% of the participants said, yes, I usually have face-to-face interactions, but that number dropped to 25% only 5 years later. So one more reason why we should look at the emojis and why we should examine the so-called computer-mediated interaction. So what are the emojis? Once again, I already mentioned this. Emoticons are now an unavoidable part of our interactions, and 10 billion emojis are sent every day. So what is the root? What is the beginning of the emojis? Who came up with the idea? So we say that the word emoji comes from Japanese, and it means, "I" means the picture, and moji means the character. And the simplicity or the level of complexity of the emojis can change, because as you can see, we have simple smiley faces, but we also have animal depictions with different meanings. As you can see, the monkey here, maybe the embarrassed monkey, the ashamed monkey, but also we can have emojis that are expressing different actions, right? And nowadays, we have even platforms where we are able to combine the different emojis, and we can create the one that we think really is able to represent our ideas or thoughts and feelings. So who was the creator of the emojis? this guy is responsible for everything, right? His name is Shigetaka Kurita. Shigetaka Kurita in 1999, he was inspired by the manga. Most probably you know about those. These are Japanese comic books where the story is presented only in pictures, the Chinese characters and the weather symbols, and he created the different kind of characteristics, different pictures for a platform for which he was responsible at the time. Drawing on Kurata's design, the Japanese mobile company NTT Docomo launched the first widely used set of the 176 emojis. But the real boom with the emojis started in 2008, when Apple actually introduced them and incorporated them into their system. And the word emoji was recognized by Oxford's dictionary in 2013, where they define it as a small digital image of icons used to express an idea, emotion, or other feelings. So we have that word. Okay, so emojis are there, and when we start questioning, okay, the Japanese designer created the emojis, but there's always a reason why this trend was accepted by the wider audiences, by the users, by the end users, and why, for instance, we are using the emojis so frequently. One reason is because they are adding personality. Whenever we are typing our messages, sometimes if we do not add the emoji, just by looking at the written text, the message can be ambiguous and it could be misinterpreted. So we want to avoid that, and it looks as if right, the end users, we found that very useful. Another reason why we're using the emojis is because our brains, it looks as if, are able to interpret a picture in 12 milliseconds. And it took us a little bit longer to read and interpret a written text. So it looks as if, because we are always in a hurry nowadays, it is much more kind of practical to add an emoji or to use a number of different emojis and to send a message than to try to type something which, as I said, takes much longer. And the emojis became so widely used that Vivian Evans, in her 2017 book, really named them as the world's first truly universal forms of communication. But are they really universal? And can everybody understand exactly the same thing when we see exactly the same emoji? The answer to that question is complicated, but I'm going to present evidence for both yes and no. So let us first start with, are emojis culture specific? And the first answer is yes, they are culture specific. And in 2017, this guy, Keith Broney, became the first translator of the emojis. And at the moment, he is the chief editor of the Emojipedia. And here, actually, you have the link for the Emojipedia. What you do there, if you have, as I said, if you don't know the meaning of a specific emoji, you just type smiling, as I did here, and all the different versions where we have a smiley face appear. And again, on that Emojipedia, you are able to combine the different emojis if you think that the perfect emoji for your feeling hasn't been created yet. So why do we need a translation of the emojis? Because, as I already mentioned, exactly the same emoji can mean different things in different cultures. And I'm going to give you a number of examples from different cultures. So the first one is the halo emoji. In the Western world, it signifies innocent, right? So you are an angel. Agree? But it looks as if in China, we have to be very careful if our interlocutors are coming from this culture, because it looks as if it is a sign of death. Then, this emoji, I very frequently use it to say thank you to the people, right? But in the Christian world, yes, it is a prayer, it has a religious connotation. But when we go to Japan, it could mean please do something for me, or we can simply use it to say thank you. Other two examples are thumbs up, because these are emojis that are used very frequently. In Japan, it doesn't mean okay, right? It means the number 5. And in Iran, it's seen as a root symbol. So if we have interlocutors coming from those cultures, as I said, we have to be aware of those differences. And then a friendly wave, right? For us, or for the Western cultures, just a friendly wave. But you have to be very careful not to send that again to the Chinese interlocutors, because it can mean the end of a friendship. Something that I noticed only when I started researching the emojis was probably we have this increasing chart emoji, right? Nothing wrong with it. So it can mean only positive things. But then, you see, we look at exactly the same thing, but people coming from different cultures are focusing on different parts of the emoji. For the Korean culture, the color green is considered unlucky. And if you use that and you congratulate your Korean kind of partners or research associates with that sign, we did it, partner, you have to be very careful not to use the green emoji, but to use the emoji where we have the red line, because the red is considered lucky in the Korean culture. Okay? So we see exactly the same signs, but different meanings. Now comes another question. Do we have emojis that are used only in specific cultures? So can I just see your hands? How many times you have used this emoji? 1, right? Do you use it frequently? Where do you come from?
I use it a lot.
Use it a lot? In which meaning? To say what?
Let's say I'm joking about something. That's how I use this emoji.
Mm-hmm.
Like making fun of, I guess.
Making
But
fun.
in a kind way.
This one, right?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. And so most probably you will be surprised that the meaning is not that. Okay? So what about the second emoji? How many of you have used that emoji? Again, you. Excellent. So in what meaning?
The clown one I can describe, I'm thinking right now. I want to do something, but it ended like vice versa. So I'm in a funny situation.
Uh-huh.
That's how I say I'm a clown now. So.
Ah, okay, a closer meaning actually to the original, right? So, as I said, whenever I started researching the studies done with the culture and the different emojis, I realized that there are some emojis that are used only in specific cultures, and this emoji is specifically used in the United States. It can mean a sense of exuberance, whimsy, confidence, adventure, or other kind of sentiments. But I don't know, as I said, this was the first time I was even learning about that emoji, okay? And when I started looking at the clown emoji, I realized that it is very frequently used in the German culture, but as I already mentioned, sometimes even within the single culture, we can have misinterpretations or different interpretations of the same emoji. So whenever they did this study with the users of that emoji in the German culture, they realized the younger people, the Z and the Y generation, they were using it to mean I'm dumb, foolish, right? Or something is idiotic. But the older generations, that is the boomers, were using it simply to say, aha, that's funny. Okay? So once again, we have to be really careful whenever we are using one emoji instead of the other, especially if our interlocutors are people coming from different cultures. Now let us go and have a look at the second answer of the question. Are emojis culture specific? And the second answer is no. And this was the reason why I named my presentation, Do We Know That We Smile in the Same Language? Because whenever they looked at the most popular emojis in the last 10 years, they saw that this face, where we have tears of joy, then we have the red heart, and then we have the rolling on the floor laughter, were the most popular emojis in the last 10 years. Yes, we might not agree on whether the cowboy is funny or whether the clown is something dangerous or that we are stupid, but it looks as if all over the world we agree that yes, this is smiling, this is I am happy, and then again even it is so funny that I am rolling on the floor. Okay, so what about the implications of such study? How can we use, because this is a symposium, international symposium on new trends in language studies. So how can we use this research or all the information that I've presented so far in our foreign language classes? I started doing the research on different studies on emojis and teaching foreign languages, and I realized that people are showing us that we can use the emojis to teach vocabulary. Okay? And as you can see, well, I only mentioned 2 studies here, but we have quite a big number of studies where, for instance, they tell us that we can create pictograms, create a greengrocer stand where we can introduce the different emojis, and then the people can exchange, right, signs and say, okay, I don't want to buy the tomatoes, but I want to buy a kilo of oranges, for instance. They're also showing us, the studies are showing us that we can use the emojis to talk about the different grammatical structures, so the comparative and superlative. And we already saw this example. Which one is funnier? In which picture, in which emoji the person is happier, for instance? We can use that in our foreign language classes. Another thing is, a lot of people focused on how we can use the emojis to develop our students' writing or speaking skills. And they say that you ask a student, each student in your class, to choose a different emoji, then you put them in the same group and you ask them to create a dialogue, to create a story, to create something that is interesting, maybe a joke using the emojis. And this hopefully, because this is very relevant, this is something that they use those emojis all the time, and they say that they have more fun creating the stories than using the classic pictures and other tools. Of course, we already mentioned that we can be very careful and we can introduce the different emojis to talk about politeness. But we can also use emojis, it looks as if, to assess our students and to give them feedback. For instance, they say, try to agree in class on the different meanings of the different emojis, and then whenever the students present or submit their homework or their projects, use the different emojis and it is going to be much faster because the students already know what your feedback is if you, let's say, introduce, I already mentioned, the smiling face versus the roll on the floor. So what is the meaning? And you are going to have an easier time giving feedback to your students. Okay, and finally, conclusions, of course. Hopefully in this presentation, very briefly, of course, but I was able to show that language and culture are multifaceted and dynamic, and the teaching of foreign languages should not be monodimensional. We should be introducing, because now this is a classic world, but we are living in the world village. We are able to interact with people coming from different cultures and language backgrounds, and only talking about the language might not be giving the whole picture to our students. Body language is culture dependent, and if we are introducing the foreign languages to students, to our students, we should be introducing some of the rules of the use of the body language and facial expressions as well in our classes. Already said, the emojis are here to stay. And maybe it's time to start introducing them in our classes, in the different classes at the different levels, because we want our students to be world citizens, to be able to use them, and we want them to avoid the negative stereotypes. And of course, regardless of the differences, please do not forget that smile is always better than the frowning face. Thank you. Do not forget that maybe we're frowning in different languages, but we are smiling in the same language. So, if you have questions, maybe hocam, because yes, only 36 minutes. Yes, yes, hocam, please.